Okay then, a big welcome to all of you. I'm Hugh Simpson-Wells, founder of Oxford Computer Group. This is the third then in our four-part series about how Identity Panel Suite can replace MIM when the time is right and provide many additional benefits in the meantime. This one is about exposing identity data to users securely, and it's about Service Panel. This is one of the applications in the suite. So in the first one, we talked about Identity Panel. Identity Panel is the application that underpins all the other applications in the suite. What it does is scans data from disparate identity repositories, so things like Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, your sources of truth, HR systems, contractor registration systems, indeed all sorts of services that you might connect to. It stores a history of the data it collects, presents a joined up view of each identity. It provides the reporting capabilities that will be used by all of the applications. And it has a workflow engine, again, which will be used by all of the applications. It does have a special relationship with MIM, with both the synchronization engine and the portal. But what we're talking more about here is replacement of the portal, how we can substitute Service Panel for the portal in the same way that last week we were talking really about how HyperSync Panel can replace the synchronization engine. Point is that Identity Panel sits underneath all of the others. It makes the identity data available to the other apps, and it also provides facilities for them. We talked about the idea of silos. So we have a silo for each of the things that we're talking to. Synchronization, in our case, is now taking place with HyperSync Panel in our demo, but it could be some external process. Last week, we looked at HyperSync Panel. HyperSync Panel then was about flowing sets of attributes between the various objects that had been scanned from the systems, provisioning, deprovisioning. It optionally defines a hyperverse, just like the MIM metaverse. In a sense, it's just another silo, but it can flow attributes to itself. And that becomes important in our discussion about Service Panel, is the philosophy of Identity Panel Suite is a little bit, I don't want to say looser, more flexible in the way that it deals with the metaverse idea. Importantly, again, this will come up in Service Panel, it handles the uniqueness requirements that we might have, supports password management and so on. So this week, we're going to, this is showing the HyperSync panel, showing how we're flowing data to the hyperverse and then away into the sources which have now become targets as well. This time we talk about Service Panel. Service Panel then is about sharing all of this data that's been scanned by Identity Panel. We've got all that data available. We can share it through custom forms. You can make an analog here with the MIM portal and the idea that we can expose users, groups, and other objects through custom forms, but somewhat more flexibly in Service Panel. It's also, just like MIM is, it's secure. In MIM, I think that the mechanism for security is a little obscure, and a lot of people have perhaps not always done the best job of making use of that. I think what we'd say about Identity Panel is it's holding a lot more information, a lot more identity information than the portal typically is. There are a lot of capabilities there and a much more intuitive way of controlling the security, and so there's no excuse for not applying it properly. It can provide MIM portal-like solutions, so we'll be thinking about white pages, managing users, so perhaps enriching our user objects with further attributes, and then the synchronization engine would then take those attributes off and take them wherever they need to go. User self-service, so the ability for perhaps personal attributes to be handled, even requests of various kinds to be handled in just very MIM portal-like way. And other identity management, something that many organizations have done with the MIM portal, is to handle users that might not appear in the HR system, temporary staff and the like. It can also, this is Service Panel now, can also integrate with digital workflow systems like ServiceNow. what it can do is initiate workflows in ServiceNow, but it can also extend the reach of ServiceNow to all the systems that are managed by Identity Panel, which may be talking to many, many systems. So I can only show you so much in the time available, and I've restricted myself to half an hour to make these sessions as accessible as possible. And that means that I'm having to squeeze a lot in. I'm going to try and show you the art of the possible without going under the covers very much. I'm not going to be showing you the configuration because we would be here all day. So the Service Panel then is going to take the data that's available in the various silos, present that data through custom forms, and if you make changes, and depending on the security, you may be able to make changes which are written back potentially to these different systems. Now, they could be written directly back. It could be that we're using a hyperverse because we've got a HyperSync panel in use. It could be that we could take information from the hyperverse and write back to the hyperverse, and then just to allow the synchronization engine, the hyperverse panel, HyperSync panel, to do its thing and synchronize that data wherever it has to go. It could be that we're even wanting to store quite separate data in a separate silo. So if, for example, we're dealing with contractors, temporary staff of some kind, it might be useful to have a silo for that that's simply handled by Service Panel. And you can make an analog here to the MIM service database, where we can store additional data, we could store additional objects, define a different schema, and then we could allow the synchronization engine to take care of that information in whatever way makes sense. There's a great deal more flexibility here than in the MIM portal, but it's achieving much the same things. And of course, that data can be reported on. We can kick off workflows based on what's going on in the form and so on. In other words, changes, any change we make to a form, which could be checking a checkbox, it could be actually making a change to the data, could kick off a workflow, which in turn might send an email, it might run a PowerShell command. Once you can run a PowerShell command, well, you can pretty much do whatever you need to do. And it also, in any case, integrates quite well with various other systems. Now, just before we go actually into the demo, just a sort of idea about how the security is working, because I'm not going to be showing you the configuration in any depth. We have the concept of audiences. And so one audience would be me as an admin. And then we might have a number that we've defined based on groups. Now, we're sitting on Azure. So we have Azure groups, which we populate in order to populate the audience groups that we need in Service Panel. So I've got a bunch of people sitting in an HR audience group, a bunch of people sitting in a service desk audience group, and you can imagine the other sorts of groups that I might have. Then there are some special groups which are kind of built in. So there's everyone, which is trivial. Self is very important. So this is a referential thing. So is manager. And you can imagine that these different audiences, depending on who they look at, would be able to do different things. So a manager might be able to do edit some details of a user that just any other user couldn't. If for yourself, you might be able to edit certain attributes which nobody else can edit. When we get into Service Panel, what you'll see initially is a dashboard made up of modules, and the modules that we put on just for the purposes of demo are one that simply shows my own identity data. So whoever's looking at it is just going to see their own details. The ability to search for people, so that's our kind of white pages, so way into white pages if you like. Search for groups, which we won't be using, but just to show you that there might be something else there. And we'll also have a form for creating a contractor, so it's a slightly different feature. And if we have time, I'll show you all of these things. If we choose to go from my identity or from searching people, we can go into a detailed view in which we see far more information about the user's concern. And there will be different sections with different attributes, and the audience feature will control who sees which sections, who sees which attributes within those sections, and who can edit those attributes. So there's nothing complicated about it. I'm just kind of setting it up there. Okay, so let's take a look let's get straight into what you'd see if you get into Service Panel. Now, I haven't done any branding here. This could be branded for your organization. This is absolutely raw, out of the box. This is the kind of thing that we just use when we're training. And we are in a dashboard. Now, you see straight away that there are various other things that we can set up. Because I'm an admin, I've got access here to some kind of user report. We don't need to go and look at it. We've covered reports in previous webinars. I can just have simply a URL that I can go to. In this case, this will take me to Identity Panel. And here's simply a link to our website. So straight away, there are other options here which a user might find useful. Here on the right then is the dashboard. You can see the dashboard highlighted. Here is a dashboard for our administrator. So to try and keep this simple, we've simply got 4 modules. Their own identity data, I am lab admin, the ability to search for people, the ability to search for groups, and the ability to create a contractor. What you're seeing here is data displayed in slightly different ways. These icons are really just visual cues. They don't do anything, except for this pencil icon, which is special, and this pencil icon indicates that there's something here that we could edit. Now, if I show you a slightly different experience that you'd get if you're an HR person, so Samwise Gamgee here is in HR. He's not actually got access to all the same things. So straight away, dashboard, yes, and the ability to go to a website, but we're not expecting an HR person to be going into Identity Panel and, for example, running synchronizations and things like that, or configuring things. It's all entirely configurable. That's just what we've chosen here. Also, they can't search for groups. So this is just to show you a slight difference. And you'll probably see a little bit of difference in the number of items that are there. And then if we go in just as any old user, we would expect to see even less information. So in this case, they can't create a contractor, but they can see their own details just like anybody else, and they can search for people. If I do a search for a particular person, so we're looking at a white pages-y sort of thing here. So here's somebody called Avon. The administrator has full access to everything. They can see lots of stuff here. They can obviously edit quite a few things, including this personal information here. If we look, if we do the corresponding thing for our HR person, search for exactly the same person, and see that they've got less information and there's less stuff that they can edit. But they can still edit this personal information, which is emergency contact information and so on, stuff which perhaps is not handled by the HR system, but is just being handled here instead. You can also see at the bottom, it was just off the bottom before, at the bottom we can see who the manager is and if they're managing anybody else. And then if we go for the regular user, this is James, the unlikely James Kirk, they see, if we go and find another user, same person, they see even less information. This is just the way we set it up, and none of it is editable. That little pencil icon isn't there. But they can still navigate using these, hyperlinks like this. So we're looking at the manager, and that we could look at the manager's manager. We could look at somebody that reports to that manager, and so on. So they still have access to the white pages. If there's a phone number or something that they want from there, they can get it. But they're not able to edit any of these details at all. Okay, let's stick with this person, Avon. Let's be, for the moment, the HR person and imagine that we're going to edit some personal details. So what we've got is a form here. The form has 2 pages, one of personal details, one with emergency contact, and then we go on to submit. So this is, you can probably see quite straightforward parallels with other systems where you've edited things. Certainly the MIM portal is not dissimilar in structure, although the actual detail on how it looks is rather different. And you'll get different ways in which the data can be displayed. So these inputs, we have special inputs for phone. I haven't actually got any dates, but you can imagine that there are date pickers and things like that. If there's an asterisk, it means it's required. This particular one allows me to choose a different country, perhaps, in which case it will respond by formatting it in a different way. Here's an email. If I were to perhaps not have a proper email, it might complain. Yeah, there it is. That's not a valid email. So we just used a regular expression there. I might change something. Let's change avenue there to street. Not very imaginative address, I know. And then we could move on to the next page where, again, we could make changes. So that I'm only showing you a handful of different input types here. There are many other different input types, but we'll submit that, and then we'll go back to the dashboard again. Now, ordinarily, what would happen now, because I've made a change, is we would expect that change to somehow be propagated everywhere it needs to go. Well, somehow in our case is using HyperSync panel, and we would normally wait for the next cycle of HyperSync panel. I'm not going to do that because in our demo environment, we want to be in control. So I'm going to use the link here to go to the identity panel, and I'm going to tell it to do a delta synchronization. Now, the delta synchronization will be fairly quick. There is an overhead. It only even bothers every minute or so to think about that. But once it gets going, it'll obviously be very quick. And we can go and look at this person, find our user. Our user was called, here we go, Care Avon, and look at that user's properties. And I changed avenue to street. It's already come through and it's been propagated through as required. So we're seeing then the interactivity between, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Let's go back to there. The interactivity between the HyperSync panel, service panel, and identity panel, which is underpinning all of it. Let's consider for a moment the three experiences that we've looked at. The experience of the admin, the experience of our HR person, and the experience of our user. But there's one more experience, which is the experience of self. So if I am a user here, let's go back to the beginning here. So here we are James Kirk. You saw that whoever we look at, they get a white pages experience, but they can't change anything. But if I go to my own details, suddenly I have access to a lot of information. I could again edit my personal contact information and have that propagated through wherever it's supposed to go. Now, as I've said before, any of these things, any of these changes I'm making could be kicking off workflows in the background. In fact, in a sense they are, because that's how stuff gets written out by HyperSync panel. But changes we're making here could be integrating with other systems, kicking off PowerShell scripts, and so on. So I want to give you one more demonstration. And this one is going to be of creating a new contractor. So this would be somebody that's not in our HR system. We're keeping an independent set of contractors that we want to manage. And here is a form then for doing just this. This is a simple form. It has 2 pages. There's a general page and a job page. There's all sorts of stuff we could be storing here. I'm going to keep it really simple. We're just going to go for Susan, and then sure. Oops, that's what would be neat. Sure. The location, we'll put them in perhaps the Chicago office. We'll give them a phone number, and that's a US format, so it tries to put it into US format. I don't think I've done a very good job of providing that phone. If we were to go for instead a British format, and I were to put in that, it puts it into the British format. So that's all fine. We can go on to the next page. Now, I'm using a generic form here, if you'd like. There might be many different types of temporary staff that I'm storing. This happens to be a contractor, and so the job title is forced as contractor, and it's grayed out. Manager, we tended to use last week Einstein. I'll stick with Einstein. The company, don't really care so much about that. And here's a picker. So this one's a picker, and I'm picking them as being in a support center. And I should have mentioned that what we're looking at here when I chose the manager without really focusing on it at all, but as I start typing, you can see that it's picking from all my existing identities. I meant to show you that. So I'm going to submit this new contractor. Now, what's happened to this contractor? Well, they have been put into a separate silo, which has been defined expressly for the purpose. So we have huge flexibility here in having additional silos for handling these new types of user that we want. Again, you can make a parallel here with what normally goes on in the MIM portal, but there's a good bit more flexibility here. So to get things to happen, I mean, I'm expecting, aren't I, that this person is going to get created, and I want them to be created as an Azure cloud user. They don't need to be an AD as it happens. So again, I'm going to need a synchronization. And so I'm going to do a Delta synchronization, and that's going to happen in the background. Now we can view this person in different ways. One way I can view them is, as I've showed you before, is in the time traveler. And here are the silos that we're dealing with. So I'm searching for this new person, Susan Shaw, and already seems to have appeared. In fact, it's right in the middle, I think. There it is. It's right in the middle of finishing. Now, what's happened here is that we've put these details in. You'll see it really does match up with what I've just done. I didn't, this is not a fiddle. We can even see the hire date there is the right date and so on. And here's the yeah, and there's other data over here. So what's happened is the synchronization service, the HyperSync panel, has created them in the Hyperverse, but not merely that, it's come up with the unique naming that's required. So we'll see a unique UPN prefix, which UPN suffix isn't a surprise, and a unique account name. We haven't had an S Shaw before, so it's obviously been easy in this case, but it's generated these unique values and then used them to provision Azure. And if we go and look for Susan Shaw in Azure, I dare say that she will have arrived by now. So we'll go to users, we'll search for Shaw, and for Shaw, she has arrived, and there she is. And if we look at properties, we'll see some of the properties that I put in here. We'll see the create time there, absolutely is what we just did. So we've looked then at several different, we've focused a little bit on the security and the audiences and the different experiences that people are going to get, because all this identity data must be exposed securely. We've looked at some flexibility in the forms that you can have, and we've really barely scratched the surface with that. And we've made the point that we can create and store new information as well as enriching existing identity information. We have not shown, but we've said that any of this could be firing off workflows which go and do all sorts of interesting and important things elsewhere. So I'll just go back now to my PowerPoint, and key points I want to get over are this whole suite is cloud-based by design. It's highly performant. That's particularly important when we're thinking about HyperSync panel, but it's important everywhere else as well. We've seen that you can have all sorts of custom forms, a lot more flexibility than you have in the portal, but you can make that analog with the portal and the way that forms could be created in the portal and that audiences could be set and so on. I've mentioned custom workflows. Integration with ServiceNow obviously didn't show you that, but integration with ServiceNow, and that's just for example, so other systems like. And again, want to keep focusing on that granular security, which is security that applies to the forms that we're looking at when we're viewing data, but also when we're editing data, down to the attribute level according to audience. And that is pervasive, not just through Service Panel, but through the whole of Identity Panel suite. So what's next then? As usual, any further questions, please email me. We'll be sending you a link to the recording, so you can forward that link along with the others if you want to your colleagues. Email me if you'd like a discussion. My email address is at the bottom there. So email me if you'd like a discussion about your particular needs and a personalized demonstration. It's only possible to go so far with in a demo. I think we're going to put up a quick poll just as we finish here in order to just find out if anybody wants to say they want a demo now. Please join me for the remaining webinar in the series. I think we're going to finish strong because I think Access Panel has a huge amount to offer in the governance area. So we'll be looking at getting control over groups with Access Panel, but not just that, but rather more. Again, there'll be parallels with MIM, but much more besides. And of course, you can go to our website to see the previous recordings if you didn't see them. So I don't know whether we've got any questions today. And I am trying to read a few questions. There's a question here about courses on Identity Panel Suite. Yes, if you want any training, please let us know. We are writing the training courses for Software IDM, and we do very much instructor-led courses. That's the way we like to do things. It's a complex product, and it's a product being cloud in nature that does tend to change over time, and so we prefer that approach of being instructor-led rather than having canned information. Absolutely, and we can arrange to get you on some training. Can silos be created via Software IDM for custom data? I think I've answered that. This would be in MongoDB. That is the database. Of course, if you wanted to get it out into a SQL database, that's simply a synchronization issue. That's simply a matter of, sorry, the question is asking, would this be a SQL database or in MongoDB? Well, MongoDB is the database that's used by Identity Panel, but there's no problem getting data out of Identity Panel into any other system. That's just a matter of adding another provider. That's all just configuration. So I think I've answered the question about whether you can have custom data sources and repositories and even targets. I hope you've got the idea that yes, you can create a custom custom silo, and of course then it's configuration to get it out when where it's needed. How would the Azure tenant silo coexist with AAD Connect in a given environment? Okay, really good question. What we were doing in this case was actually writing to Azure AD. I think that that's not necessarily something that we would recommend as a general thing to do. If you've got AD, then we would recommend writing into AD and using Azure AD Connect because it's there and it's free and it's less configuration for you to do. But in this particular case, we didn't want to have to configure Azure AD Connect in our demo environment, and so we simply used the inbuilt capability of Identity Panel. So the answer is they could coexist, but I would have thought you would tend not to have them coexist. You can go directly. You could split it in a logical sense or in a data sense. You could have perhaps employees being done one way, so anything that goes into AD could synchronize with Azure AD, while if you had cloud-only users, you could perhaps write them out directly. But you would have to manage yourself, keeping those a Chinese wall, as it were, between those two sets of users. Hope I've answered that one okay. Would the Azure tenant silo manage O365 licensing, and would this be via Azure Dynamic Groups, individual member or guest users in the tenant, or potentially either? I think the answer is potentially all of those approaches are possible. I mean, yes, certainly you can be managing licensing, and we'll perhaps talk a little bit more about that next week as well, because controlling your licensing is an important governance issue. So I think all of the above, and that's something that we could very easily cover in a personal demo. So that's taken me up to and just beyond the half hour. I think I've gone through all the questions. I hope that was helpful. As I say, get in touch for any further information or a personal discussion about it. Thanks everybody, and see you next week.